What about someone who you don't know? What would make you open their email?
I think a really descriptive subject line. I think people have the inclination to be cute or punny. And I get a lot of emails that the subject line is like, hey, got a second, or a quick question, or a favor. And I don't like that because it tells me absolutely nothing about what's inside, like who this person is, what they want. So sometimes the subject lines that aren't as adorable, but like are very descriptive, like pink martini glasses for the Barbie lover. I know instantly what you're pitching me and why. And it helps. It really helps because I do get like 1,000 emails a day. And but if I could just scroll my inbox and know instantly what that email is going to be about, it helps me sort of categorize it in my mind.
Well, hey there. Welcome to Media Savvy, the podcast that gives you a behind-the-scenes look at what it takes to get noticed by media and become the go-to expert that they keep coming back to. I'll be sitting down with successful writers, producers, and entrepreneurs to learn the tools and tactics they use to build their reputation and in turn boost their business. I'm your host, Taub-Dix, and I've been working with top-tier media outlets for more than 30 years, anywhere from traditional print publications to online and social platforms. And I'm sharing my nutrition guidance without gimmicks. But you don't have to be a dietitian for this podcast to speak to you. Through my one-to-one conversations, you'll learn how to build a strategy to get your name in the news and establish yourself as an authority in your field, no matter what the industry. With Media Savvy, I'm on a mission to inspire, motivate, and empower you to have the confidence and tools you need to shine in the spotlight. Are you ready? Let's get Media Savvy. Hi there, and welcome to the Media Savvy podcast with Taub-Dix. I am so excited that you're here today because I have a guest that I have wanted on the show right from the start. And if you read, you've probably read one of Aly's stories. Aly Walansky is such a proficient writer, and her pieces appear everywhere, from today.com to UTango to Food Network to Martha Stewart. And if I kept throwing out names to you, we'd be here all day. Aly is one of those journalists where when she contacts me to ask for nutrition-related quotes, she doesn't know this, but I drop everything and I get right back to her because I know that she is potentially handing in the story within minutes of her request, and she'll confirm that. And if I don't chime in quickly, it's an opportunity that has passed. So I can't wait for her to share her skills with us. And Aly, I am just thrilled for you to be here today. Thank you so much.
Oh my God, thank you for asking me. You know how much I adore you.
All right, so backstory. You are an incredible writer, and I have admitted that it took me years to even call myself a writer because my major was nutrition, not journalism. Did you always put pen to paper, even as a child? I mean, tell us a little bit about what brought you to this place in your career.
Oh, yeah. Like when I was a little girl, I didn't want to necessarily do this type of writing. I wanted to write like trashy romance novels. And that was like my fantasy when I was like, growing up. But in college, I was the editor-in-chief of the campus newspaper. So that's when I started doing like more newsy type news. And I realized like stuff like, breaking news and politics and global affairs, it's important, but it's depressing. So I decided to focus more on the type of things that I like to read. So that's why I write about like food and travel and, lifestyles, the fun, a little bit less intense type things.
I think that says so much because I think when you show what you know, then your sincerity and authenticity will also come across. But, you write about such a wide variety of topics and such a wide variety of publications, anywhere from talking about money issues to whether sushi is healthy. I mean, sometimes you write about things that have nothing to do with each other. So many times on this show, we've talked about how essential it is to write about what you know, but also to speak in the language of your audience. So how do you adapt your writing style to suit so many different platforms that you write for?
Well, it's interesting because a lot of people tell me when they read my writing, I read like I speak, which is funny because I don't realize I'm doing that. But I guess because of that, I'm probably not adapting to the audience so much as the audience is adapting to me, which honestly makes it easier.
Well, that's kind of interesting. But, maybe that's because at this point you write for publications that sound like you and where the people who are reading look forward to the way that you speak. I think that that's a big thing, which could be very different for people starting out. And I think that that's why it's important for people to find their own voices, right? I'm sure that for you going from like serious, maybe not the most exciting news to writing about things, just as you said, like, food and travel, I think that that really makes a huge difference.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's all about finding your passion. Very often I do consulting sessions with aspiring writers, and I tell them, write about what you're interested in, because you're going to have lots of really long, thankless days of deadlines and, tons of stuff coming out to you. And it's going to be harder if you don't really love what you're doing.
Yeah, that's for sure. And, I know that you've conducted so many interviews, and I know you also do podcasts. We'll talk later about your own Substack, which I'm really excited to talk about. But do you ever get nervous before doing an interview?
Sometimes. I get nervous when it's someone who I myself am a really huge fan of. There's certain celebrity chefs that I maybe have interviewed a half dozen times, but I still get a little bit starstruck around them. There's definitely celebrities, actors or musicians that I've interviewed that it's exciting because you do get a little bit starstruck, but after a couple of minutes, you get into the groove of it and you realize they're just people and you're just talking.
Yeah, that's for sure. And, I have seen lots of celebrities in my practice, some of which I cannot talk about because of HIPAA laws. But, some other ones that really were big stars. And people always ask me, did you get their autograph? It's not that kind of thing. I think that when you put on your journalism cap and you just figured, okay, I'm just talking to a regular person here, it really helps to calm your nerves. I don't know if you kind of do that. Are there any other strategies you have for calming your nerves?
Oh, absolutely. I think it does help a lot just to remember they're a regular person. They, have the same day-to-day issues and concerns as you. Maybe they just have so from a slightly different environment. And yeah, you will get starstruck. I still go to media events and dinners and see celebrities and ask for selfies. But when you're in the capacity of an interview, you kind of need to turn that off.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I agree with you 100%. And another question, I know that I'm rambling these questions to you because I know that this is what my listeners want to hear about. One of the things that I know that I sometimes get stuck with or struck with is writer's block. Or I really am just I need a break from what I'm doing. And so many times when I'm writing a story, I'll get up and have a cup of tea, or I'll get a snack, or I'll scroll a little bit on Instagram. I don't know if any of that sounds familiar to you, because I don't even know where you find the time to get up and eat, or go to the bathroom. I mean, you are really just pumping out story after story. So what kind of strategies do you have to stay focused and stay productive, especially when you have tight deadlines, which I know you always do?
Well, I try to stick to a pretty strict routine, which is a little bit complicated when you travel a lot. But for example, I don't do daytime events. I try to take planes that are going to be during my normal working hours, because I like to start being on my computer at the same time every day and stay through, because that keeps me structured and that gets me output. I do take afternoon breaks to watch General Hospital. And I know that sounds so random and so silly, but you know what? Sometimes you get overwhelmed with the rigor mortis of our world of the emails and the deadlines and people's egos. And if you turn off for an hour and you're watching something that is completely out there and ridiculous, it helps you put it all in perspective.
Yeah, I think that it's important to actually take breaks. I mean, maybe not as many breaks as I often do when I'm writing a story that I don't really want to want to write. But I do think that it's really important to take those breathers, because sometimes, I don't know how you feel about this, but sometimes for me in those breaks, that's where I actually get inspired by one thing or another.
And I can always tell the deadlines I'm putting off, because when I suddenly think it's a great idea for me to clean my bathroom, I'm oh, this is something I really, really am putting off right now, because I really don't want to work on it right now. You know what? We all have those assignments. We have those assignments we're excited about, and we also have those assignments that you just have to get through.
Yeah. So what about that? Have you ever gotten any assignments that you really didn't want to do? I mean, I sometimes get things 5 ways to bust belly fat. And I think a big mistake that a lot of, maybe dietitians or people who are interviewed or want to be interviewed are doing is that they pass up some of these stories because they think it's not in their wheelhouse or they don't really want to answer the question. And I know that for myself, when I get a story like 5 ways to bust belly fat, I may say that I may just comment on why I don't think that that's a great title or why I think that busting belly fat might be a myth. And I still get quoted because it kind of goes against what their title is saying. And I think that you have to provide just a different opinion. And I know you have done stories about, the 5 best breakfast at fast food places, right? Like what happens? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I definitely have done assignments where I'm like, this is not the most interesting thing in the world, but I think it's important to take as many of assignments as you can because it's good for relationships. It's obviously good for, workflow and workload and future other assignments that you might be more in your wheelhouse. So I very rarely say no.
Was there ever assignments that you walked away from?
I mean, yeah, there's been times I've said no if it was like a situation where like they were offering me an absurdly low pay rate or like the editor was being incredibly difficult to deal with or it was a deadline that just didn't make sense within the confines of what they were asking me to do. So I have to be realistic and I have to manage expectations. But if it's an assignment and it's like, the rate that I should be getting and it's something I want to be doing and I'll say yes. I say yes like 98% of the time.
Could we talk about money for a sec? So, I think that these days it's really unfortunate that there are so many publications that are barely paying anything. But I just did a webinar the other day with a group of it was dietitians in business, and they were asking me about doing free work. And I have done a lot of free, and I'm putting that in air quotes, work because of the exposure. And, like I wrote a column for USA Today for 3.5 years, and I never got paid for that. But the exposure was ridiculous. A full page ad cost, $150,000 a day. And yet they would do a full page ad with my picture with, work, because it wasn't really an ad. It was information. So, what about that? Do you, at this point in your career, ever do pro bono work, or can you speak to that for people that are just starting out?
Oh, yeah, I don't work for free at this point, but there is a point that I did. I mean, everyone did it at one point. I don't do it now for 2 reasons. First of all, it takes away from paid work. It also, I feel like if you agree to do free work, it makes it possible for other people to not be able to be paid for that work. So I don't want to do that. I understand why, I think that it's possible that you would say yes to lower paying assignments from bigger outlets because of that opportunity provided. And there's always times where maybe you want to write about a press trip you took. So you say yes to a lower paying assignment because at least you could place the press trip then. So, that would do it. So if it benefits you in some other way, I could understand why you would accept lower than whatever your standard rate might be.
I think what a lot of people don't understand also, unless you go way back when we first started out, is that freelancers, which was not called freelancing in those days. I never even thought about the word freelancer. It sounded more like freeloader to me, which is exactly what it is not.
Exactly.
But freelancers were actually entrepreneurs starting their own businesses. Mm-hmm. And yes, we may have done a lot for free in those days, even though I called that for free work my marketing budget. That was my marketing budget. But we really were starting out our businesses. And if you did a lot for free, then that means that you weren't really putting a lot or asking a lot for your business.
Right. At the end of the day, you have a bottom line. You have to consider the return on investment. You have to pay your rent or your mortgage. You have to pay your phone bill and pay your groceries, and exposure doesn't pay for those things. So yeah, when you're first starting out, sometimes you have no choice but to do that. Yeah. But later on, you have to, and it comes down to if you have 3 assignments pending on a day, if you take on a 4th, you're not being paid. That takes away from the stuff that is paying the bills. So yeah, I wouldn't encourage that.
Yeah, I agree with that, especially, for something like me. And I know 100% for you, I could tell by your Instagram that you get a lot of samples in the mail. I don't, and sometimes when I'm working with a brand, I do social media campaigns for them that I'm getting paid for. So sometimes I don't actually like to promote items that I'm not getting paid for because it's sort of unfair to the brands that I'm working with. And I know you feel the same way.
Right. Like I actually I never really say yes to samples. I say yes to them, but I don't ask for them. So if they arrive, I'm fine. If they're offered, I'm fine. But I don't really like to reach out and ask for things because then I feel like there's a certain level of obligation. Like if I reach out and ask to try, I don't know, a air fryer, then I feel obligated to write about it because I've asked about it. But if someone just decides to send me an air fryer, then I'm considering it for upcoming potential stories. And you know what? Gift guide season is coming up. I'm sure there'll be potential to maybe include an air fryer. There usually is. So I think that's like the distinction also.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think that that's important, again, for my listeners. And also disclosure. You know, if you are working with a company, then it is really important that you disclose that you're working with them. And I think that a lot of people don't realize that that actually shows authenticity.
Oh, absolutely. So I don't really do any brand partnerships type thing, but obviously I know people that do. And I 100% see people who don't disclose and they post about it on social media. And that is not kosher.
Yeah, not kosher is right. And, you know, I also know that you work for so many top tier publications, and that going back to the freelance thing, there's nothing like working for ourselves. And I know that you have a super popular Substack that's going out to nearly 10,000 PR and media professionals. And I also heard that you actually do this every day. So for those people who are listening who don't know what Substack is, or who have a Substack and don't know how to make it soar like yours has, what made you launch this, and what makes it different than a lot of the other ones that are out there?
Oh, well, I started my Substack, I want to say about 3 years ago. And for years, publicists were reaching out to me asking if I had like a mailing list or a distribution list where I shared what I was working on every day. And I was like, no, but maybe I should. And so then when Substack got on my radar, I was like, this is possibly a way to use it that would make it easier for everyone. If people want to see what I'm working on, or people want to see if the story I was working on published, it's one place in their inbox that they could just, open up the email. It's a free email I send every day or almost every day. And they could see what I'm sourcing for right now, what I'm done sourcing for, what is published. And I also try to share, useful industry commentary that might be useful for other media, for publicists. I want to make it a community because I feel like very often PR and media can feel transactional, and I want it to not be that.
So, your Substack is really like an open book. And these days, there's a lot of, I'll call it competition, but I think that competition often comes from within. Scrolling on social media, feeling like somebody's better than you, doing more work than you, reaching out more than you, getting more exposure than you. It doesn't seem like you fear competition. Does that come because of your confidence? Could we speak a little bit about confidence?
Sure. I mean, I don't know, my confidence, comes in waves. I definitely have, we all have insecure moments. We're creatives. But as far as the Substacks, I have some close media friends that also have Substacks, and we all support each other. We all link to each other. I sent out mine this morning, and I linked to several things that some of my friends that also do Substacks are doing, because it's part of my attempt to make it a community where we're all working together and we're not in competition. And I might get this assignment this day or this invite this day, but at the end of the day, we all need each other and we're all in it together.
And I know I heard you mention somewhere that that in your Substack, you also do things like you write what you're reading, what you're doing, where you're going. And I have a newsletter. It's called BTD Media Makers. And in there, I also write about what I'm reading. And I think that what that makes you is a person as opposed to just a journalist, because you have all of these other interests. And I love that you do that.
Oh, of course. I share, what I'm reading, where I'm traveling. I really love to cook, so I'll share a fun recipe sometimes. And I think it helps so much to get to know each other on a personal level. And for the publicists that are reading it, if they're pitching me, it also helps them understand what I'm into, which makes their job easier in that way as well. Yeah.
And I think that the question about the pitching. So a lot of my listeners don't pitch because they fear rejection or they're afraid that that pitch is not punchy enough. So I know you get thousands of pitches a day. If I get hundreds, you probably get thousands. So what kind of pitch would grab your attention? Like what would make you respond to someone that you don't know? Because I know that for a lot of the people, if I have something interesting I want to write about and I'll contact you, for example, you know me. I would assume that you might open it.
Oh, of course.
But what about someone who you don't know? What would make you open their email?
I think a really descriptive subject line. I think people have the inclination to be cute or punny. And I get a lot of emails that the subject line is like, hey, got a second, or a quick question, or a favor. And I don't like that because it tells me absolutely nothing about what's inside, like who this person is, what they want. So sometimes the subject lines that aren't as adorable, but like are very descriptive, like pink martini glasses for the Barbie lover. I know instantly what you're pitching me and why. And it helps. It really helps because I do get like 1,000 emails a day. And but if I could just scroll my inbox and know instantly what that email is going to be about, it helps me sort of categorize it in my mind.
Do you just do delete? Do you do saves?
I save everything actually because, okay, let's go back to the pink martini glasses. I'm not currently working on anything right now I need that for, but holiday gift guide time is around the corner. I might get an assignment next week that is looking for pink kitchenware, and then I can go back to my inbox and I can search that phrase, which is part of why the subject line is being descriptive is so important. Look at it almost like SEO. And I could find what I need. So I save everything. I don't respond to everything, but I save everything.
Yeah, it's so funny that you say the subject line is like SEO. I think that is a great soundbite. And we know we love sound bites.
We love sound bites.
We do love sound bites. In fact, I did a podcast on pitching, and one of the things that I said, which I know that I always try to abide by, and I know that you appreciate, is that when I answer queries from journalists, I try to write in sound bitey type of language and very short, very clear, very concise, sometimes cute. But I know that that's because that's what you would appreciate.
You're very, very good at it also. And it's important because obviously when you're writing a story and you're quoting someone, you want them to be interesting to read, but also you want to have that pull quote that is easy to build in. Or if you're going to be quoting them in the social media links, it helps. It definitely helps.
And, along those lines, what makes like a perfect interviewee for you? And it might be something like cute sound bites, but what are some other things that you look for to make your job a little bit easier?
I'm definitely meeting the deadline and exceeding the deadline. There's a lot of people that when I say, oh, I need those responses by end of day Thursday, will send it to me sometime next week and think that's cool. And at that point, I don't even remember that I was working on that story anymore. That is such old news. So meet the deadline, but even better, be early. That's super appreciated. Remember that, a lot of people, I'll ask questions and they'll write back 1-word answers or 3-word answers. That's not quotable. So even if you can't be cute and soundbitey, use complete sentences. That matters. If I ask you a question, try to make your answer be at least 2 sentences, if not more, for each question, because you need something to quote.
It's so hard to believe that you really just get back 1 or 2 words or a list.
It happens, I would say, every day.
Really?
And I don't understand what people are thinking.
When if I don't really check, I know that Harrow isn't really around anymore, but when I check those kinds of lists of what reporters are looking for, if it's a reporter that I know, then I might write back and say, hey, listen, I could talk about XYZ, want to talk, because I know them. But otherwise, I would never think of doing that, because why would someone want to get back to you? Unless you said something really compelling, like I have a personal story that relates to this, then they may get back to you. You may be lucky enough for that. But otherwise, it just doesn't give texture.
Yeah, it does. So Harrow is actually now SOS, which is the same founder, and it's very similar. But I think it's a lot more targeted than it was towards the end of Harrow. But yeah, I mean, back when I used to do Harrow, I would get a gajillion responses to a query. And some of the people responding would be, oh, I do information input technology. And I'd be like, well, that's great, but I'm looking for a nutritionist. So you have to be credentialed in what they're looking for. Like, otherwise you're just wasting each other's time. If I need a mattress expert or a sleep expert, you're not a mattress expert because you sleep. You know? And people don't seem to always get that.
Yeah, I I certainly understand that. Although I have responded to lots of sports journalists who write to me because of somebody's smoothie or something like that. So it's a sports star's or an athlete's diet I can respond to. It doesn't mean
Absolutely.
that I'm talking about how they train. So it's
right,
important.
of course.
It's important to stay in your lane also, for sure.
Yeah, I always get people who are either trying to be like an off-brand expert, like they're not qualified, or trying to get me to change the focus of my story to fit them, which of course is not something I have the ability to do, even if I wanted to.
That is for sure. But I think that when someone responds to you, this is a tip that I think would be good for a lot of people that I know who are fear responding to journalists or think that it's like a one and done thing. If I have an idea of something that could kind of piggyback on that story, then be short and sweet, but just mention that, as long as you're writing this story, what about this? I'm sure that could like give you a spark for something that you haven't really thought about doing another story on, but it could be good for you for the future.
You could always pitch. I mean, part of being a freelancer is we're always pitching. So even if you give a spark of an idea, and even if it doesn't work for this particular story, yes, it might possibly give me an idea for a pitch I could send tomorrow for another story, which I could quote you in. So we all win from that.
Do you pitch a lot?
I pitch almost every day.
You do?
I really do. I mean, I definitely have a lot of ongoing editorial relationships where I get assignments from the editor that they ask me to do because we have a relationship and they know, the kind of stuff I like to write or I do write. But I send pitches almost every day.
I think that's so interesting because I would not have thought that. And I really would think that everybody would be flocking to you because you are such an amazing writer and because you could probably talk about anything. And I am really, so what happens? You just get an idea and you think, this would be a good idea for this publication?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically I get an idea and I try to flesh it out a little bit, do a little research on it. And I'm like, this would be a good fit for this publication or that publication. And I email my editor. And sometimes it's a publication I'm already working for, or sometimes I'm trying to seek out a contact for someone I haven't written for. And you know what? Sometimes they don't answer me. That happens. No matter how many years you've been doing that, you sometimes just don't get answered.
So could I ask you the kind of like the secret sauce of what would go into a good pitch? Yes, the subject line, I think that's like the clincher is the subject line. And then what about, how do you write a pitch letter?
Well, I think it depends on the type of story you're writing. Like if you're writing a trend story, if I want to say, I've noticed that caviar is being enjoyed in more casual ways than it used to be, as evidenced by this restaurant has caviar tater tots and this one has caviar on their fried chicken. And so caviar is more accessible now. That's how I would do it if it was a trend piece. If it was more like, here's this food news, it might be something as simple as I was in this store and I saw this thing, or I was on social media and saw this thing. So sometimes pitches are very short. I send pitches that are as little as 2 sentences or as much as a long paragraph. It depends on what you're pitching and to whom.
Well, you see, I think that what you're saying is something that is not often realized. We think that we have to write about things that are just like so monumental, and yet it's the everyday things that people are actually looking for. And I know when I used to write column for USA Today and I wrote one for Newsday, I would sometimes get my stories from the clients that I would see, the private clients that I saw, and they would say, oh my gosh, I'm having such a problem with choosing, whatever in the store. And I would be thinking, oh my gosh, I can't wait till they leave and I could write this down because this is a good story. So what you're saying is that just look around you.
Oh, absolutely. So many of my story ideas come out from being out to dinner with my friends and the things that we're talking about or thinking about or on our minds. I mean, your ideas come from the life that you're living.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What about AI? Do you use that at all in your work?
Oh my God.
What do you think about it in general?
It's the bane of my existence. I hated AI before it started to infiltrate journalism. I hated AI when I would be in the airport and I would go to a restaurant, and instead of there being a person working there, it was a kiosk where you would order on the screen. And I couldn't help but think about that's someone who doesn't have a job. Like that's the computer taking away someone's job. And then it infiltrated writing. And, the more AI that's used in publishing, the less writers that are having those jobs, but also this it's not servicing the reader because they're not getting authentic voices and content. They're getting the Cliff Notes version of journalism. And so I am not team AI whatsoever at all, 0%.
Can you tell when you send out a query to someone or someone responds to you and that they used AI to answer you?
I could definitely see that. And I could also see sometimes when people send me PR pitches, occasionally it feels AI-y. Like the way that it's written, it's not written the way that people speak. It's written almost like a generic greeting card. Like the language, the way that it's kind of like flowery words that don't really fit together. It doesn't read as authentic.
Yeah, I think it likes to use a lot of the same words, dive in, let's dive into this. I don't know, for some reason they like dive in. Because sometimes I'm just curious about it. And I know that one of my sons told me, why don't you put your name into AI and ask them to look you up? And I wound up getting a full page bio, which honestly, I was impressed that there was so much information that was true there. But then it also said I graduated with the honors from Queens College. Never went. I could count the times I went to Queens. And it said that I was on this board that I was never on.
Yeah, it has wrong information all the time. It's almost like letting Wikipedia rule our lives. Like Wikipedia has a place, but you don't want it to replace us.
Exactly. Well, I have two more questions for you. And one of them is that if you had a chance to send a message to your younger self, what would that message be?
Be a grown-up about rejection. It's going to happen all the time, no matter how old you are. I've been in this industry for 20 years, and people still ignore my emails or say no to my pitches every day. You have to not take it personally and just keep moving forward.
That's hard. That's hard. And I think that it is so true. And I guess another piece of advice that I could add on to that is that if you do get a rejection, that could have just been the wrong time in the wrong place. It doesn't mean that it's not a good piece.
Of course. Just because someone doesn't want my story today, someone may else want it rejiggered tomorrow. It's never over. It's just, you have to keep working on it. It's a process. It's a journey, not a sprint.
Yes. And looking back on your career, which is super successful, what is the one piece of advice that you would give to someone who's either aspiring to be a journalist or just really loves to write and maybe wants to write a book? How can they move into this rapidly evolving media landscape?
I would say utilize social media. When we were first starting out, social media was still in its early days, but now it's such a gold mine. Follow the editors and journalists you admire. See what they're working on. Ask if you could take them out for coffee. Connect with them, learn from them, and you never know when someone might be willing to mentor you or give you your first assignment. So you have to put yourself out there. That's the best thing you can do. When I first started out, I would go to every press event I was invited to. Now I don't because I'm old and tired. But back then I would, because it's the best way to meet people and build those relationships.
I just gave this webinar that I just did the other day. The one question that I got asked most is, how do you start out? How do you start out in media? How do you start out reaching out? And what you said is so true, that it is easier than ever to reach out to a journalist, to say something personal, to comment on their work. I'm sure when people comment on your work, if you had the same people commenting on your stories over and over and over again, and then they reached out and said, hey, I would love to be a part of your next story, it's much more likely that you're going to choose a familiar name and a little avatar than you would someone that was cold.
Oh, absolutely. Like when I first started out, Instagram, I'm pretty sure it didn't exist yet. But now I get story ideas from social media. I have people who reach out to me on social media. It's how I connect with chefs or bartenders that I want to speak with. It's a great way for crowdsourcing. Like use like the assets that the world has given us. It makes it easier.
And it doesn't have to be for sales necessarily. So many people feel like social media is not going to get me anywhere because I don't have a lot of followers. What you're saying now has nothing to do with your followers.
Nothing to do with followers. During the pandemic, I was doing a lot of like cooking at home, like on my Instagram stories. And I did it to build community because I was lonely and I was feeling isolated. And it was a way of me feeling like I was having dinner with other people. And out of that, I actually connected with a lot of other home cooks and food writers because we were kind of thinking the same way, and it helps you build a community. In the same way I was talking about with the Substack, it's all about, finding your community and nurturing it. And that's the key. I honestly think it is.
Yeah. Well, there's so much out there that is, stuff you really can't believe, especially as you know, and I know in the nutrition field and even in just the field of health in general. So I think that if you could come out sounding and being authentic and sincere, then you already are way ahead of the game.
I hope so. I mean, you know what? There are a lot of people out there, but you're not in competition with them. You're in competition with yourself. And I think it's important to realize that.
Yes, for sure. For sure. Well, Aly, where can people find you? Because I really want, and I know that you have show notes and you'll be able to find links to where you could find Aly in the show notes. But Aly, what do you like best?
My Substack, I put my the words underneath my face, but also my Instagram. I share all my stories in both places, so you can see what I'm working on. So if you're a dietitian or a chef or anyone who wants to be quoted, you can just email me. I don't care if you have a publicist. I don't care how famous you are or how many Instagram followers you have. If you have great things to say, I would love to talk to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I thank all of you for being here today. That's a wrap for today's Media Savvy podcast. Such a huge thanks to Aly for schmoozing with us. And if you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did, I hope that you'll subscribe to the show, that you'll write a review. And of course, I would love it if you spread the news to your friends, especially if they are aspiring to get their name in the news, maybe be a journalist. This show is perfect for them. And remember, it's not just about getting your name out there. It's what you do with that, how you could help people and how it actually could help your business soar in ways that you can't even imagine. So I hope that you'll tune in next time and follow at BTD Media on Instagram. And don't be shy. Throw me a question. I'm here for you. And by the way, you are looking mighty media savvy today. So I'm Bonnie saying goodbye for now, and I will see you in the spotlight.